Did you ever play any arcade games or console games in the 80s or 90s?
Oh my god, I spent so much time playing console games and arcade games in the 80s and 90s. That's pretty much what I did if I wasn't at school or asleep. Funny thing is, my parents wouldn't buy me a Nintendo or Super Nintendo or a Genesis, even though I begged and pleaded every Christmas, every birthday, because they didn't want me to rot my brain. They wanted me to go outside. So what I did is just went next door to my friend's house and we'd play over there. So, yeah, oh god, yeah, I love video games.
Did you ever dance in the 80s or 90s?
Did I ever dance?
Yeah. If so, did any of the dances have a name? Would you be able to tell me what the dances were called?
Okay, well, I was about to say, like, what kind of dance are you talking about? Because my parents did make me do show choir for 2 years. That was miserable. My name was Back Row Richuso because I was not a good dancer. The Running Man, remember that? Cabbage Patch. I don't remember the name of it, but there was a song with the percolator. It's time for the percolator. That had a song. Square dancing was big back then, and line dancing. Never got into that because I thought it was just strange even at the time. I'm trying to think, what other dances were there? I mean, like, head banging. Like, I was again into grunge, so that's when the mosh pit game became really big. So, you know, we thought we were cool in junior high, and Smells Like Teen Spirit would come on, and we're all edgy teens, and we would mosh pit and just push each other around until our teachers told us to stop. But no, I was not a good dancer, so I did not know many of the dances out.
What were some movie effects in the 80s and 90s? And would you prefer them over the movie effects of today's age?
Actually, I sort of like what they're doing now. The big thing in the 80s is for a backdrop, they actually had to go out, say if you wanted a backdrop of the Grand Canyon, they actually had to go out there and shoot with that as a backdrop. Now they can all do all the digital effects and everything. You could, put them in front of a green screen, and then you can put in whatever you want for a backdrop. So it saves them a lot of money. And yeah, I love the digital effects, and I'm a big fan of animation too. I mean, when I first saw Toy Story, it was just like, how did they be able to do that? Because I grew up on things like Bugs Bunny, where it's the old 40s and 50s things, the Looney Tunes, and now, yeah, it just amazes me.
Were there any disease outbreaks that happened in the 80s or 90s? If so, what were they called? And did they have any effect on you or people that you knew?
Okay. The only one I was really aware of in the 80s was AIDS, of course, and I really didn't know any gay people back then. I know there was a lot of artists that I listened to, like, Freddie Mercury from Queen came down with AIDS and died later, and I really missed the band Queen. And of course, then you had some like Rock Hudson, and it's mostly the Hollywood ones I knew that were affected with it. But Indicator, we really didn't know anybody that came down with AIDS, or else they didn't talk about it.
What genres of music did you listen to, and why? What about them interest you?
Okay, back in the 80s, of course, you had the English New Wave bands, and so I was always into those. Plus, we had MTV just starting out, so you stayed around the TV set a lot for parties because you always wanted to watch the music videos. Of course, they've gone away from that now, and that's sort of sad. But I liked the fact that they had a lot of synthesizers. Being a keyboard player, I loved listening to the synthesizers, and then they've gone away from that. And then once the 90s hit, I ended up turning into blues music because a lot of the stuff that was coming out then was the voices were synthesized, and it seemed like all the same beat. Well, I like to see people playing instruments, and that's what turned me on to blues music, which I'm still into today.
What was church like in the 80s and 90s compared to now?
More people went to church then compared to now. Everything is so open and free, and these generations are completely different than the way we've grown up. Church for me was almost an every Sunday thing because my mom and dad grew up in church, and so we were going to Sunday school and church every week.
What were some of the hairstyles that you rocked back then, and would you bring them back if you had the chance?
So when I was little, Mr. T, watching the reruns of Mr. T, I'm sorry, the A-Team and the episodes when I could remember them, and I wanted a mohawk, so I had my dad cut my hair into a mohawk, like Mr. T's. I would never bring that back. And then I had a curl, and it had the kind of had bangs in the front, and then it had a shag in the back. But I would comb it back like a mullet, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And on picture day was always after recess. So when it's time to take pictures, your hair is in shambles, so they give you that little comb, so you got to comb it back. You got to make sure my hair is combed back. And I always left this little pouch sticking out on each side because I couldn't get it right because we didn't have much time, and then I had sweat and curl juice running down my sides and all down here, so I got to try to clean that up, beforehand. It was a big mess, and no, I would never rock a curl.